Tonight's episode is brought to you by Beaten to Death, a new film from Welcome Villain. Experience the most brutal horror film of the year at home, as Beaten to Death is now available on digital. Beaten to Death, the latest film from Welcome Villain, the studio that brought you Malum, unfolds after a desperate choice leads a man named Jack down a path that leaves him beaten and bruised as he struggles against man, nature, and his own sanity.
Stranded in the middle of nowhere after barely surviving a horrific assault, Jack encounters one local after another and quickly learns that a sick game of cat and mouse is about to begin. Battling the deranged country psychos and the harsh landscape, Jack must go to extreme lengths to survive. This acclaimed Australian shocker pulls no punches and, despite being the subject of controversy for its extreme violence, has been extremely well received by critics and fans alike.
Drawing comparisons to films like Wolf Creek, Killing Ground, and more, this festival hit is sure to satisfy gorehounds and thrill seekers looking to kick off the spooky season with a bloody bang. Prepare yourself for a movie that critics are calling utterly terrifying and an intense viewing experience that will put you through the ringer. Directed by Sam Curtin and starring Thomas Roach, Beaten to Death is now on digital anywhere you rent or purchase movies online. You've been warned. Hello and welcome to Colors of the Dark. I am your co-host Rebekah McKendry, and with me is Elric Kane. How you doing tonight?
Bonjour, Bekah. I am Kenneth Branagh's accent.
Oh God,
as
that was
Perot.
that was cringy, dude.
Yeah, well,
That
it was meant
definitely...
to be up there with Kenneth Branagh's accent, so.
Oh, it needs more bees. That's what it needs.
Yeah,
so yeah, we will kick off. Man, you're just jumping right in.
Yeah, I
So
don't do
Elric
chit chat anymore. This is the second
No
podcast in 2
chit-chat.
days.
This is-
I don't need to know how you're doing. I know how you're
This is
doing.
my third. This is my third.
Exactly.
podcast.
I did one with you. The audience might not know how you are, but
Oh yeah,
I know
we
how
had
you
like
are.
a. You know how I am. We've covered this.
Yeah,
We're good.
I'm good.
We're good. But yeah, over the last weekend, we went to go see Haunting in Venice, the brand new one from Kenneth Branagh, starring Kenneth Branagh. You know, how have you been about the prior ones? Because this is the third of this series now, of the Perot
Yes,
series.
I have a lot to say
Have
on
you-
this.
How have you been on these?
Well, I started by purposely not watching either of them and never saw them. And that's how I am with them, because he sounds like he was doing Peter Sellers' accent in Pink Panther movies. So the first one appealed to me because I like murder mysteries, but I've seen those movies, the originals, and I just was like, with a mystery, if you remake a mystery, I don't know if they're exactly the same twist. I assume they are because they're based on Agatha Christie. It's hard to get excited when you know that element of something. If you know who done it, then why remake it? So I just didn't have much interest.
They change them up a little bit.
But then the second one I heard was a train wreck. And
second one, so I will watch any murder mystery, much to my fault, because not all of them are good, and I'm definitely the type of person that will just type in murder mystery on Amazon Prime and let fate take its course, and it's not always a good thing. But that said, the first one, I fucking dug. The second one, I liked parts of it. There was definitely like a 20-minute monologue about the history of his mustache where I was like, what the fuck I'm not kidding. It's an honest to God scene in the movie where I was like, what the hell? Where are we now, guys? So that takes us to this one. Okay. So you have not seen the first prior two.
No,
so
but I've seen I have seen the character do those movies before.
Mm-hmm.
So that part, and I do know some of the criticisms. And for me, one of the reasons I stayed away was actually running time. They're so long. And when I saw the running time of this one, well, first we obviously saw the trailer of the new one, which makes it looks like a supernatural film for a long time before Perot was even introduced. And then you're like, oh, okay, so that's cool, good setting. So that got me excited enough to want to go see this one sight unseen, which I did with you. Well, I didn't go with you, but same weekend as you.
We went the same day, actually. So yeah. Okay. So the setup of this one is that Perot has completely retired and he is hanging out in Venice. He lives in this kind of lush estate by himself. He's kind of a self-imposed retirement. Like he's really just avoiding everybody. You get the idea that he's kind of drowned himself in cakes. I guess you do that. And is really not associating with anybody, isn't spending a lot of time. Well, one of his old friends, who is a mystery author played by Tina Fey, shows up at his doorstep and is like, look, I know you're not solving crimes anymore. but I'm invited to a seance tonight. And she specifically says, because immediately he's like, nope, they're all charlatans. I don't want anything to do with this. And she's like, I can't figure this one out. This seems like the real deal. Let's go do this. And suddenly his interest is piqued enough that he's like, okay, let's go. And they arrive at this amazing palazzo. And it is this ex-opera star whose daughter has just recently died. Fell from a balcony and drowned in the Venice channels below. And so that is who they are trying to contact. And so then they bring in Michelle Yeoh, who is playing this absolutely famous psychic. And probably within a couple of minutes of him being there, Poirot starts kind of getting these visions, like weird things starts happening that is supposed to kind of be our indication that they're supernatural. Plus the palazzo has this entire back history of like kids killing people, that it was like an orphanage way back when, and that the kids are still all around killing people.
That's right. Yeah, that's actually pretty cool. I really like the design of this movie. I think the way it looks and feels. Occasionally there'll be a shot type where like they literally copy a sequence that copies what what Scorsese did when he put the camera on the actor, in Mean Streets, and they do it to Poirot, and I'm just like, yeah, I don't know if this works in the setting of the time period quite, so it's a little too modern, but it was fun, and I liked the supernatural like setups to it. Obviously you're watching a mystery of somebody who's probably grounded in reality, so you know where it might be going. Spoiler, there's a ghost killer, and that's who did it. The end. So go see this movie because it's actually a ghost slasher. No.
It is. No, there were parts of this that I really liked. And what I liked the most about this was the setting and the production design. So much so that I felt like that was, part of what Branagh liked as well, because you talked about there were moments where like they would put the camera on the actor. There were other moments where they would have like cool lamp in the foreground, and it would literally be like a diopter shot with the cool lamp and then a character kind of in the background, smaller but still in focus. Like the production design was such a powerful thing, to the point that you're staring at statuaries and floral sprays and wallpaper patterns and wainscoting. And usually I would kind of, find issue with that in a movie. But in this one, I was like, oh, no, go back over to that corner. What was that thing? Like, it was just beautiful production design.
And it has stars, but they went a different direction with this, because it's people like, Michelle Yeoh just had won the Oscar, but she still is not like a mega star in America. Mm-hmm. Jamie Dornan, who had just been in his previous film and has been in the 50 Shades movies. I love Kelly Riley in a lot of the movies she's been in, but now she's famous for Yellowstone. And then Tina Fey. Tina Fey's character did feel a little bit like the podcaster from Only Murders in the Building. It's almost like the same storyline, basically. But I think that actually helped position. I really liked Bran in this, actually. I think he got a chance to play an interesting character because he was seeing things that don't make sense to him and challenging his perspective on reality, while also not having to decide whether he is still on top of his craft, I guess. Mm-hmm. And so there felt like there was actually pretty good stakes. There was a lot to like about it. Again, this kind of subgenre often ends with a 20-minute recap to explain how everything breaks down. And
Elric knows that was because I texted
where you had
him
an
immediately afterward. That's where I had an issue. Is usually I like for the murder mystery to kind of unfold through the entire thing instead of just a 20-minute explainer at the very end. This was definitely have no clue what's going on. Okay, here's how it happened. And then there's like a 20-minute explainer. There are times that I like that. I will watch Tim Curry do that in Clue all day. But this one, it was just, it definitely went more in that path. That's not usually kind of the pacing that I want in murder mysteries. But that said, I will say this is definitely my favorite of these three so far. Possibly because of the ghost, definitely because of the setting.
The mood, the mood's good. People on
the
here,
mood was great.
You love Giallo, you love You Don't Look Now. This has that, and it was a fun thing to see in a big screen. I think in the middle I lagged a little bit. Might have been late at night. I remember just getting a little sleepy-eyed in the middle of this movie, but it kind of bounces you back as it goes. So
I saw this. I went to the super early morning show on Friday. I saw this. It was like a 10:30 show in AMC. I was one of 3 people in the theater. And there is something amazing about eating a giant AMC jumbo-sized bucket of popcorn for breakfast. I mean, like, that's a commitment. And I did that just for this movie.
I had a margarita bigger than my head, and that might have been why the eyes were getting sleepy. But anyway, I thought it was fun. A good big screen movie to kind of kick off. In a way, it's kind of kicking back off spooky season as we get into September, which is kind of fun. Neither of us got to see The Nun 2 yet. We both really want to, and we just couldn't align. We want to see it together. So hopefully before the next show, and while it's still on a big screen, because I'm genuinely curious.
Yeah, we'll find some time this weekend to go see it, definitely. Okay, so I'm going to take us to one that I watched a couple of weeks ago, but the embargo just lifted, so I can finally talk about it. So Deliver Us. This is a brand new one that is coming out soon. I believe it's doing a smaller theatrical as well, or at least has been. I know that it had kind of played a lot of festivals, so you're immediately going to discover why I had requested a screener copy of this weeks ago, and that is when a nun in a remote convent suddenly becomes pregnant. The Vatican sends all of these priests out to investigate. And one of the priests is this guy who is still a priest, but you realize really quickly he's got a girlfriend. Like, he's not really kind of believing into his own hype anymore, but he's still going through the motions. Like, he still definitely likes the church. He likes what he does. And so the Vatican sends this team out to investigate. And what they decide is that this nun has kind of had this immaculate conception and she's pregnant with twins. And they immediately find this old-timey scripture that says, oh, if a nun becomes immaculately conceived with twins, one is the Messiah and one will be the Antichrist. And so we should just like kill them both. And so he is immediately like, they're talking about ending the pregnancy and things like that. And he is immediately like, whoa, guys, we can't do that. And so he basically absconds her and takes her to try to get her away from that situation. And then things start getting really freaky. Like, at that point, you think she might just be pregnant. Like, there's always that question of like, did she just hook up with one of the other priests in the church or something like that? Like, has she been lying the whole time? After he kind of steps in and is like, y'all aren't touching her, we're leaving, it starts getting real supernatural. And at that point, it's got some seriously freaky moments. Like, there was some good, psychological freaky moments to it. It's real slow burn. It's got like an A24 feel where it's going to be slow burn and then it's going to have these crazy moments and then go back to slow burn. I liked the ending of it. I liked where it went a lot. So yeah, this one, it's very, it's period to a degree. It definitely feels like most of it is kind of taking place in this very kind of antiquated church environment. Real slow burn, but I rather enjoyed this one. Deliver Us.
You got Thomas Kretschmann in there. I don't know which character he is, but I like Thomas Kretschmann. He's in the new Indiana Jones as well, and King Kong, a lot of things like that. Okay. Yeah, I haven't even heard of this one. I mean, there's been a lot of crazy priest movies lately.
Consecration, I spoke about a couple shows ago. Like, we've had a couple of really tight religious horrors as of late. And yeah,
my guess is Russell Crowe got her pregnant. Actually, it was the Pope's exorcist. Always blame him.
Pope's exorcist, it definitely was him. He is quite the charmer. So Russell Crowe did it.
I saw a number of new, lesser known indies that are all coming out. One that was interesting. It like had a lot of big visuals. It was a new Malaysian horror film called Bloodflower just hit Shudder.
Sam Zimmerman recommended this, said it was really good.
Has a lot of visuals that I think you'll dig. It's almost like almost too much movie at times because there's so many different things. It starts with like a young teenager who's like got some supernatural psychic abilities but doesn't understand them yet because his mom is one, and his mom and they're going out into this forest with the husband and his other sister, and they're going to go help somebody with a demonic kind of some sort of possession kind of situation. They go out there, the mom they're kind of trying to deny the powers in their son for now, and because they do that, they don't teach him, and then the mother tries to take on this demon and ends up killing her. And so then it cuts to, a few months later, and the son is now, in denial of his power, even though had he known, he might have been able to save her. They're in this high-rise apartment complex, and it's kind of confusing. There's a guy who's kind of an asshole, and there's even like incest vibes, that has this entire apartment where he's got all these giant flowers that he goes out into the jungle and brings back, and he's asking them to look after. He clearly runs this apartment, and he is not a good guy. But the flowers are incredible, and that's probably where the blood flower of it comes. And there's a door that has a one of those parchment papers on it, and not to go in there. And of course, these young teenagers, they knock it off, they go in there, and then it unleashes this crazy demon thing. And what's interesting, especially on this episode with the demon, is some of the time, some of the demon stuff is like CG-ish, but other times they do this giant stop motion creature. Ooh. And it's super interesting, but it's also kind of weird in the context of just the reality of this movie. There's a lot going on in this movie. They then are trying to, it's killing multiple people in this building. The flowers play a very interesting role at one point. It's pretty graphic. I saw in this movie somebody eating a baby. So that added that to the had not seen that image before. It has some pretty crazy stuff. So I think it didn't all come together to me necessarily as a movie, but there was a lot in it to admire and find interesting on the purely, cool horror visuals. So I on Shudder, if you've got it, I do think give it a watch. And again, we don't get to see too many films from Malaysia, so horror films.
That is awesome in itself. I will always watch Malaysian horror.
Yeah.
Okay, so that takes me to, did you watch It Lives Inside?
No, I didn't yet. I still really want to because it's coming to theaters very soon.
Yeah, so this one has been getting relatively good reviews, and I will agree with those. Like, there is definitely something here. It is about a family, specifically a young girl who is from East India, and her family has moved here. Her mother is still very much culturally grounded with East Indian culture. Her dad is a little bit more kind of Americanized, I'll say. Like, he's definitely embracing culture a little bit more here. She is basically rejecting it. Like, the movie opens with her shaving dark hair off her arms because she doesn't want the dark hair on her arms anymore. She doesn't like speaking in her native tongue. She doesn't like associating herself with it. She's worried about taking cultural cooking to school. Like, she doesn't like taking it in her lunch and things like that. So she's really just trying to fit in with everybody at her school, and to the point of rejecting her prior culture. Well, at the same time, another one of her friends from East India, who she had grown up with, they had been best friends when she was a kid here, has really kind of withdrawn from the school. Everybody views her as like the weird, depressed kid. She's always in dark clothes, hair down over her face, and she carries around this mason jar that looks like it's kind of filled with dirt and grime. And she tells this other girl, Sam, that there is something evil in it, that she is trapped in there, and that she can't hold it back much longer, and she's scared it's going to get out. And what works, and of course it does get out. That's like where it goes, like 20 minutes, not even 20. It's like the 15-minute mark, the jar breaks. And so then it focuses on these two girls, and specifically Sam, as she is now kind of confronted with this supernatural monster from a culture that she is trying to really distance herself from, and having to kind of go back to it to figure out what to do. There is a lot about this movie that I loved. I loved the cultural setting that it's in. I loved how it was using horror as a metaphor for kind of rejecting this culture, and, having to then go back and embrace it and realize that that's who you are, and that it never goes away. There was a lot about this movie that I loved. The scares were where it fell a little flat for me. Like, it just did not have quite the scary punch that I was expecting it to have looking at the trailer, but how the culture is built in, how it's perceived within the movie, the pacing, all of that stuff really worked. This one, it's in theaters now. I know it's playing at the AMC's here in LA, and I believe it is coming to VOD within the next week or two. And this is It Lives Inside.
Imagine if the Venice Haunting in Venice opened the same way. Branagh shaving the hair off his arm, trying to reject his French sensibilities by living in Italy. Man, that would have been so much better. What a tight open.
Tina Fey shows up with a jar, being like, "There's totally something in here."
Yeah,
saving the mustache.
I could see it. Yeah, I do want to see that one. I'm going to see it. Yeah, I've read a few reports just saying it's hard because the monster isn't really visualized much. And that can make it tricky. So
you don't see it for much of it. And that does make it, that's probably why the horror moments some of them did not work as well, that you don't see much of it. And there's a reason behind that in the movie that I won't reveal. But yeah, it made it harder to kind of grasp the horror of it because so much of it is unseen.
Okay. But I will definitely watch that. The next one I saw, wow, I knew nothing about it. The words "good boy" just popped up, and I'll only go up to a certain point, and then I'll tell people spoiler, and I'm going to give you one little hook to watch.
I don't even know what this movie is.
Okay. No, this will be fun.
Where'd you watch
don't look
this?
I had to pay on Amazon or whatever. Is
this the one from 2000? No,
that's from now. It's a new. So it's just called Good Boy. It's from Denmark or Sweden. I think it's Sweden. It starts with this basically kind of looks American Psycho-ish, very good looking, very suave dude wakes up, and then then his dog is waiting for him on the foot of his bed, but his dog is a full-grown man dressed in dog costume, but you never see his face. You just see him dressed in dog, and it's kind of weird, and he feeds him, and it's just totally how you would treat a normal dog, but it is a person in a costume. And then you follow this guy out, goes out on a dating app, and he goes out on the date and meets this girl, and he's actually kind of shy, and he's a little reserved, this man, and talks to her, and they kind of hit it off, and they're out on this date, and he's like, you want to come back to my place, and I do have to warn you about one thing. And then he explains, look, I live with somebody. It's this guy, but he lives his entire life like a dog. He never takes off his costume. You can't ever address him as a person. He lives his life fully in subservience to me, but as a dog. And she's just like, what? Like, she just it totally, is beyond weird. So she's like out of there, and that's that. And then later she meets her friend, and her friend knows the guy's name because he's like a local millionaire heir to like some fortune there. And she's like, you have to go on a second date. Are you crazy? And she's like, yeah, but he had this dog. And she's like, are you kink shaming? Don't kink shaming. You should just be open-minded. And she's like, okay. So she goes to his house for dinner. And he's like, you want to meet him? And he comes in, the dog comes in panting, and like, she pets it. And it's just super, it's one of those movies where you're watching it and going, I don't know how this is going to last 80 more minutes as a narrative, but you have a few ideas maybe while you're watching it. And it's interesting. The setup, it's up to there. I was pretty intrigued. It was weird. Okay. Quick spoiler, because I have to give this much to give you a hook to if you were going to watch this movie. It won't be a spoiler of the whole story, but it is enough that to me is what made me interested for the rest, but it might be more than you want to hear. So if you don't want to hear it, just leave 30 seconds. Okay. She's hanging out with this dog, and they do this for a few days, and she's having this nice relationship with her new boyfriend guy, and the dog is just the dog. And then one day she walks into the room, and the dog does this little crawl towards her, and then the mask comes off, and he just goes, you have to get me out of here. I am terrified of him. He's been capturing me for the last year. He's a psycho. And so from that moment I was like, oh fuck, okay, now I'm in, because he's not actually his pet. He is actually a captive who is having to live like a dog. And so then I was like, all right, wherever this goes now, I'm at least interested. It becomes not generic, but fairly standard from that moment on, but still kind of fun because the stakes were suddenly, because I really didn't know, how is this even a movie? Like, what I'm watching, how is this gonna escalate in any way unless the dog's a psycho and unless the dog's a creep? So it was fun, like on that level. I thought it was actually a pretty playful, simple film. I got the feeling, like I said, the director's name on a lot of the credits, so maybe it was like a very it doesn't feel totally cheap, but maybe it was like something very handmade. So anyway, good boy, interesting flick.
Yeah, it's only got like 5 actors in it. I just watched parts of the trailer. This looks fucking terrifying, because when you say guy in a dog costume, I wasn't quite picturing as horrifying as it actually
pretty weird.
is. It's weird. Okay, this looks.
But it was worth watch. It's like, it was just weird enough to be like, all right, I get what you're doing. All right, good boy.
Okay, so I'm going to take us to The Unbinding, which is a brand new, I'm going to call it documentary. I've seen people online disputing this fact, but yeah, I don't know if it's a fact. I'm going to call it documentary just because that's what the descriptor provided by the filmmaker calls it. So this is now on VOD. This is from the people who made Hellier, which I had covered. I can't remember if it was on the show or Deep Cuts. I may have covered it on Deep Cuts, but it is a couple who collect haunted props. That's kind of their thing. They have YouTube shows, they have a podcast themselves, and they collect haunted props. I had seen this pop up on a lot of people's feeds as, hey, this was really cool. It was kind of creepy. So I was like, okay, you know what? I'm in. Hellier was a different documentary. It focused on kind of a different supernatural phenomenon. And admittedly, Hellier did not gel as much with me. So I was kind of skeptical going into this. I will say I was really intrigued by the kind of premise of this, which is people send them supposedly haunted props, and they're kind of realists about it, where they're like, yeah, most of the stuff we get, it's nothing. Like, it's somebody had some weird vibes off of it, but we're holding it and there's nothing there. Like, to each his own. But they get in the mail this, they call it the crone, and it is this woman statue, this kind of carved woman statue with her arms bound by her side and then all these nails in her eyes. And they receive it in the mail, and immediately they're both like, I feel something. But then they start kind of documenting their journey with it. It was supposedly found by hikers in the Catskills. They set up cameras. They swear that it's like doing weird stuff around the room, and they set up cameras and it looks like it's jumping around, like it's rotating and turning in place. Like, it was actually some footage that I was like, huh, that's kind of interesting. And so then they start researching where it came from, the environment. Some of it, they get some pretty trippy evidence about this particular prop, and it really continues to escalate. And the people are Greg and Dana Newkirk, and they actually provide some evidence that I was like, huh, that's kind of interesting. I will say I'm definitely too much of a skeptic to go full force into films like this, but I have seen a lot of people online who absolutely were like, holy shit, that was horrifying. I will be the first to confess that I want to believe, but I have never really had a great supernatural or ghost experience myself. So I'm the first one who's like, show me empirical evidence or it's bunk. And so I spent the entire movie, instead of like really engaging, going, okay, so maybe, is that a trick of the light? It's probably a trick of the light. But that said, this really hit with a lot of people that I love and respect online. And even I spent parts of the movie going, oh shit, that was kind of cool. So even if you kind of do not dig ghost shows, because I am definitely not the type of person who would watch supernatural, the paranormal research ghost shows, this was well made and there was a compelling story behind it. And it made me say, okay, you know what? I will stay with you for a full 90 minutes because I want to believe in your creepy, weird statue. And so, yeah, this is getting good reviews online. It's got something. I think that it's going to hit you a little bit more if you are a little bit more open to the supernatural stuff. I need my experience. I need the time that I'm like, holy shit, something happened and it feels bigger than me and I can't explain it. I'm waiting for that. I want to believe, y'all, is what I'm saying. This documentary was pretty cool, even if you don't. The Unbinding.
Yeah, I almost watched that. I just knew nothing about it. I saw just some pretty good reviews online, and I didn't know what it was. They were citing these shows that I'd never heard of. I'm not into like paranormal ghost shows, but I maybe believe a little more than you do.
You do, because you had something creepy shit before.
A little bit, like, but mostly it's just the fact that my mom had something like that happen to me, and she's like a total skeptic. So when somebody skeptical tells you something and they're like, there's absolutely no other way to explain it, then that made me a bit of a believer as a young kid, hearing her stories. So I don't know. I'm somewhere in between. But of course, we all want to believe something, that there's something out there. So
I deeply do. So yeah. But this was a cool, even if you're non-believer like me, even if you spend the entire documentary going, oh, wait, was that just the light? Was that like what? Like your air conditioner caught on and that made it move slightly? There's still something fascinating. And it's much better filming than their prior doc Hellier. Like they got much better like cinematography and filmmaking skills along the way. So it was very technically competent as well.
So I hope somebody sends us haunted objects. We never
I want a haunted object. I haven't had one yet.
We want a haunted swag bag. People send us swag bags for movies, but we want a haunted swag bag. So all right. I saw a movie that was interesting. Somebody sent a screener for a new movie, or like one of these emails saying, would you like to see a screener? I never respond to these usually. And this time I was like, I don't know what this movie is, so I'm going to say yes to a movie called NIGHTSIREN, which is coming out soon, directed by Teresa Novotova from Slovakia and / Czech Republic. This I think was interesting. It's a little less, it's played up as a folk horror. And it has a folk horror setting, and it is about folk horror beliefs more than it is a horror film. It is a young woman's return to this native mountain village that you see a flashback to when she was a young girl. She was running away from an abusive mother, and she accidentally knocks her little sister off a cliff and leaves town forever after that because she feels so terrible and hasn't returned till now, believing she's killed her sister. And she comes back now in her 20s, and everyone's saying, you can't go to that hut. It's owned by the witch. And everyone in this town, it's a modern town. That's the interesting thing. It's a modern set story that has people who are still, because they're in this mountainous area, still believing in a lot of folk tales, and their beliefs are just kind of, still a little backwards in that way. And so it starts charting their fears. And what you quickly realize is all these fears, they're really just there to reinforce misogyny and to, because there's a one day a year where all the men squirt all the women in the town with water guns and hit them on the bum with like brooms. And you're just watching it going,
Wait,
what?
what?
Yeah.
That's a ritual. Okay.
Yeah, this is one of the rituals. And so you start to realize, oh, okay, so the belief that there is this bad witch out there is just there to help reinforce the power structures of the town and their beliefs. And there's this other younger woman there who's a little bit more edgy and punk and cool and open-minded, and they have this friendship, but people start viewing them, are they kind of witches, or are they a reincarnation of the bad witch who was there? And so the town starts to act against them. So it's much more of like becomes a bit more of a hostile, violent drama with some, but very much rooted in a folk horror setting, but not really ever going into that. The real thing. It's definitely more realistic take. I thought the acting, performances, directing style, all of that was very strong. Sometimes I prefer something that does go full supernatural in this kind of movie to be satisfying, but I thought it was actually pretty interesting. So those interesting.
With a name like Night Siren, does this go aquatic horror at some point?
It doesn't. Yeah, they don't touch water here at all, really. I mean, there's a lake, a little lake, but it's not really part of it. I think it's more just somebody calling out in the night, but it was an interesting drama. Again, sometimes it's fun it's the type of film you would have probably discovered at a festival, foreign festival, but solid. And plus I haven't seen many, not since the 60s. I don't see many Czech movie. Czech New Wave had this incredible like 8-10 year run, and then it's just a lot of those directors immigrated to America, and you don't really see movies made there so much anymore.
Okay, before I jump to what was my favorite film of the week and a couple of quick book recs, I want to just quickly mention that I was going to cover this on Deep Cuts, but it's not a deep cut. And I was like totally into the history of it because I'd never sat down and read everything. I watched Cursed on Paramount Plus, and this is Wes Craven's film from 2005, but it was supposed to be 2003. And what I had infamously known about this movie is that Craven lost it. He started shooting it. Weinstein stepped in, said that they did not like the way that the movie was coming out. He ended up having to do 4 different sets of reshoots, and basically he lost control of the entire latter half of the movie. And so I had seen this back in 2005. And not knowing any of the story, it's kind of a tonal mess. And then it wasn't until much, much later that I had learned this. And then when I saw it pop up on Paramount Plus this week, I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to watch this. I want to try to see if I can see where the prior film was and then where they reshot. The part that I found most upsetting on this, well, 2 things that I found most upsetting once I started researching everything, is Skeet Ulrich was apparently one of the major characters in the movie, and Weinstein's did not like him. And so they cut his entire character out and then apparently brought in Joshua Jackson and completely rewrote the plot within that. But the one that I consider the biggest transgression is apparently there was all of this werewolf stuff done by Rick Baker, and it was actual practical werewolf effects. Same guy who did American Werewolf in London, he knows how to do his werewolves. But they did not think it would do well in 2003 when they were making the movie with audiences then. So they cut out all of Rick Baker's stuff for the most part. Very little of it still exists, and replaced it with big CG werewolves. And those CG werewolves have not aged well. Most of the film I could forgive, but when the CG werewolf shows up, that's where it doesn't feel well, and it doesn't look very good either. So so then once I started researching, apparently in 2018 there was this not massive, cursed horror fan sized Twitter movement to try to see if fans could get what was supposed to be Craven's original film release. And it was #release the Craven cut. And apparently at the time, Patrick Lussier, the editor, said, it probably will never happen. If the footage exists, it's not going to be in a good, quality. It's going to be much like when we finally got the Nightbreed cut, that it was, degraded quality and things like that. But yeah, and they had originally apparently shot the film to be R, but when they finally released it, they cut it down to PG-13. There was just a lot of big production problems on this. And so, yeah, it was an interesting rewatch just because you can kind of see a core of Craven and Kevin Williamson, because it's written by Kevin Williamson, the guy who did Scream, in there. And you can really feel a bit of both of them, but then it just feels kind of lost in this production mess.
Well, and why take the power away from somebody like with the name Craven attached to it, somebody who has proven time and time again that they can reinvent the genre and make great movies? You take that away from them. Yes, you keep their name technically on it, but it's no longer a Wes Craven movie. And how many times in the history of Hollywood has a producer cut been better than a director's version of a film? Probably never. I actually would be curious to know if there's ever been a case, maybe if a director lost their mind on set. But in general, the director's making all these decisions for a reason, and a producer, making that. So, this is why, like Paul Thomas Anderson, there's so many directors who first film or some movie along the way gets tinkered with, screwed with, and they become furious, and it changes their whole career because they have to protect themselves after that. And I think Wes certainly didn't deserve that at that point, right? I mean, he's built a career where your name means something to you, and you don't want that taken away, which is crazy.
Yeah, no, this happens. It's history. Film history is full of directors kind of losing films and then, kind of having to sit there and look at the aftermath. We've talked about plenty of other ones on the show as well over the past, even just within the past couple of years. A lot of times word will kind of leak out about it. But yeah, this one definitely is one of the most famous that kind of had this kind of convoluted thing happen to it, where what ends up getting released just doesn't feel very congruent in any capacity.
Yeah, no, I hope someday we do get to see the full version, because I remember thinking it was interesting. Like, there's parts I liked and there'd be sequences you get into, but overall, you can't quite connect the whole.
A werewolf still flips somebody off. At the end of the day, I will watch it for the werewolf flipping somebody off. Like, that in itself was kind of amazing. I love Judy Greer. I'll watch her in anything. Christina Ricci was interesting. Jesse Eisenberg is in it as well. And apparently that was part of it, is they were not originally brother and sister in the original version. They are now. It's just, I look at it and would love to see what could have been, but we're not going to get that.
Did the werewolf have a flashback like Wes Craven's other classic film? Because I feel like dogs having flashbacks is his thing. We could have got this in there.
Well, I think that the spoiler has run out on Curse. I am going to say what I found amusing about this one on this watch that I did not connect with the first time is basically everybody turns out to be a werewolf. Like, you think that you are spending the first act of the film trying to figure out who is the werewolf. There's clearly a werewolf that's attacking people. There's like 5 werewolves in this film. And basically it becomes like, oh, you're one. Oh, you're what? But he's, and it just keeps on going. And soon everybody's a werewolf.
Oh, wow.
But one of them flips off somebody. So there you go.
There you go. So maybe it was all worthwhile. We got to that. Okay, well, that was an interesting one. There's one I really like this week that I feel like I've got a list running on Letterboxd since the start of the year, which is the new horror films I've seen this year, trying to rank them as we get to I think I'm up to about 60 movies, and it's been I would say, compared to last year, slightly underwhelming. Like, I think only the top 4 or 5 I would say are likely to be around by the end of the year for me. There's a lot of movies that are just like, yeah, that's fine. But I saw somebody had written on that list a couple months back saying, make sure you watch Venus. And I was like, yeah, well, that'd be nice if it actually had come out. And it hadn't come out, but it came out this week. And this is a film directed by Juan Balaguero from Madrid, probably, or Barcelona, one of the Rec directors. And I've watched a number of his films over the years, and liked a lot of them. This movie's really fucking fun. And this is the film that a lot of people like. If you like, it's not like Cobweb, but it's like Cobweb in the way that you start watching one kind of movie and then it kind of opens another layer to a slightly different subgenre, and it keeps doing that. This moves a little faster and a little harder. It opens kind of like Dancing Club Girl, very, very vibrant kind of scene going on, and she's ripping off the place she works with a bagload of money, trying to get out of there. She gets cut and she has to find somewhere to hide out with the money. She goes to this massive apartment complex, kind of like Evil Dead High Rise, and she goes to see her older sister, who she's completely estranged from, who has a daughter who she's never even met. And there's a lot of tension there. And then you find out that what's in this apartment complex is much, much worse than what she's hiding from with the criminals. So it starts as a crime story, and then you basically goes complete Lovecraftian cosmic horror. It feels like Lords of Salem for a lot of it.
I'm putting that on my list right now.
At the start it's not like this, but like suddenly I'm watching this movie going, wait, now why am I getting Lords of Salem vibe from the neighbors in this apartment? And then it kind of goes, by the end it also feels a lot like the movie Revenge. It almost feels like the character and the kind of her toughness by the end of this movie, which means these are good reference points for me, like Lords of Salem's Revenge. These are good, and Lovecraft, and a little bit Three Mothers, like if a little bit like the last film in the trilogy, like it has, you'll see why when you get there. I don't want to say more than that. And there's a couple really cool effect moments and a couple nightmares she has. There's a couple images that are like quite fucked up, like where you're like, wow, okay, that's a really crazy, probably the craziest image I've seen this year in a horror film. It's just a lot of fun. It doesn't all hold up under, it's one of those horror films, Cobweb's similar, where it wouldn't all hold up narratively under scrutiny maybe, but getting there was super fun. I really like this actress, Esther Exposito. I think she's pretty famous as a young actress in that country, but obviously I had never heard of her. And I think she's really strong. And this is definitely one of the most fun of the films I've seen this year so far. So want to make sure I give that a good plug. That's called Venus. I think it's about $5, $4.99 on Amazon for now. Maybe it will be coming to Shudder or somewhere. I'm not quite sure. Hereditary as well. Like it's that thing. Like Lord of Salem, like something is coming into our world and they're getting ready, and that kind of a vibe, which I did not expect from the start of this movie at all, and really dug it. So I want to get that one on people's radar.
I'm going to watch that one tonight.
Yeah.
I
think you'll dig it.
Lovecraftian.
Yeah, I think you'll dig some of the images around that. I think you're going to be like, oh, that's cool.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to end with my one that has been really polarizing. Like I have seen some not pleasant reviews of this, but honestly, I found it to be really fun, not scary, but interesting. And this is El Conde, which is on Netflix now.
I love this director. I'm a big fan of his. Yeah.
Pablo Larraín. I don't know how to say his last name properly, but he did Spencer, he did Jackie, like the kind of big biopics that have come out about women over the past 2 years. He's done 2 of the big ones. This is very much a funny, very, very dark satire. And that is where it roots itself best. He is a vampire, so there's a very strong horror element to it as well. Like he is a true blood drinking, flying around vampire. There's a whole thing where they liquefy organs now and he drinks them like smoothie. Like it's a full vampiric thing, but it roots itself most in a satirical comedy. So it's more dark comedy than anything else. But that said, it does have some horror moments. So it centers on Augusta Pinochet,
the dictator.
The dictator. So who this is it's a vampire who's been alive for like 250 years. He was like born in the 1700s. And he basically just really loved being in the military. Like he loved kind of being, a rebel rouser, excelling as a general. So it follows him through all of these different wars and armies as he's always kind of fighting on like the dictator side. And then it gets to Augusta Pinochet, and you find out that he is a vampire and he is now Augusta Pinochet in Chile. And he has decided after 250 years to die once and for all. And one of the things that I found best about this movie is that it gave 2 fucks about the vampire myth as we know it. So like he goes out in sunlight. He has kids who are human. He has like 6 kids that are human. He has a human wife. He's around humans. He just is also a vampire and has to drink blood. And so basically the setup is that he is starting to have brain problems, and it goes through something that I've always kind of subconsciously questioned is if you are alive forever, what happens to your brain? Because you think like the more amount of stuff you put in it, the more convoluted it's going to get. So if you have 1,000 years worth of memories, is your brain always like on par, or does things start slipping? Do you start like mixing up names and things like that, like most of us do? Does dementia set in, which is, you know, what happens usually when you get to be of a certain age?
Is this a parable for podcasting? Like a parable? This whole movie was just for us having to learn all the VHS titles and director names.
Every single, I have to recite so much horror, and this is it. No, but it's he's 250 and he has decided to go ahead and die. He's decided to end his life, and he has gathered his human children together because he wants them to be a part of it. But the problem is he has forgotten all of the places he hid his money. And so his kids basically refuse to let him die until they figure out where all of his different finances are. And then they bring in this financial investigator who they want to kind of follow all of the different trails to see where his money could be. But you soon find out that she's there under a different motive, that she's not who she says she is, and she's been trying to infiltrate this family. The wife is all pissed off. He's got a human wife who's very pissed off that he never made her a vampire. The kids are just pissed because they can't find dad's money, and he's like, you know, wealthy as hell, and they want that. So the whole thing is very much this dark, very dark comedic satire about the politicians feeding off the poor, the dictators, the generals feeding off kind of the people who don't have the assets to arm themselves, so they just can be taken over. And then ultimately the kids, his kids, are feeding off him. So it's the whole thing of like feeding from the nation. He's feeding off the poor. He's feeding off kind of the unequipped, but then his kids are feeding off him. Most of the story, or at least I'll say the first third of it, is told through voiceover. And I liked that. Like, it made it feel kind of like Tim Burton or Wes Anderson-y. The whole thing had that quality to it. Like, it's not meant to feel believable. It's meant to feel absurdist. It's meant to feel wild, unhinged, with these kind of weirdly absurdist moments where they'll be in the middle of a conversation about how he's about to die, and then suddenly this band comes in and starts playing, and he stops everything and follows them. And it's just got these wildly absurdist moments. And the filming is really arty. This is not going to be for everyone. And looking online, all I could see was like 1 star, 5 star. What the fuck is this? This was hilarious. This definitely hit my kind of absurdist satire sensibilities, but yeah. Don't go in expecting it to be like, you know, 30 Days of Night. This is not that. This is a satire told through vampirism as an allegory.
Yeah, somebody wrote A Dictator Walks Home Alone.
That's kind of perfectly it.
So what's interesting about him, because all those things, the way you described that movie, are almost in complete opposite of all his other movies.
Right.
And he has a movie that I've been telling, like, I actually discovered his first film back when I was working in a video store, before I came to LA, and it's called Tony Manero, and it is so good. It's set in Chile, it's set in like 1978 or whatever, and it is a guy who goes to discos and stuff, and he is obsessed by Tony Manero from Saturday Night Fever, like obsessed to the point where it's like a psycho movie. Like, the guy dances like him, thinks he is him, and then people start challenging him, and there's like a murder, and it's so intense and weird. It's a really, really good movie. And then they use that to make, you know, he made Jackie and things like that. So, but those are so different and so hyper focused on like singular characters.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, I was very curious to see this one, but yeah, glad you saw that. Cool.
I think you would like it just because of how kind of offbeat it is.
Yeah, I'm curious.
Like, I think that's been part of the struggle, is when you see horror pop up on Netflix, it's kind of hit or miss anyway. And then this one does not necessarily feel like a horror film in any capacity. It's just kind of its own creature, but a really fun one in that capacity.
All right. My last thing I'm going to talk about is for anyone who doubts my authentic love of the movie we're about to talk about. The other podcast I do is called Pure Cinema. It's about 5-6 years ago we started. The very first episode.
Vaguely familiar with it.
At the end of the first episode, out of the blue, just off the top of my head, I said to Brian, the 1980s are burning and you get to save one movie and that's it. The rest are gone forever. And he came up with something. And I, in that moment, realized the movie I was going to save was Robocop. And that's how much I like Robocop. I've always loved this film since when I saw it when I was young. It really just I mean, beyond the fact that it's a great action film, it's great satire, it's all these things. It just has a really fucking wild side to it, like all the blood, all the gore. And and I'm not in the bag, surprisingly. I think a lot of people think because I'm so into movies that I listen to like lots of commentaries and stuff. I've listened to about 3 commentaries in my entire life. I don't listen to I just don't have time. I'd rather watch it. And it's not to say they're not fascinating. It's just not the kind of cinephile I am. And
I'd always want to watch another movie.
Yeah, like, that's how I'm wired.
I want to keep going.
No, I'm the exact same way. Like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre one is one of the best things I've ever heard. I remember listening to that was one of the first commentaries I heard and loved it and learned so much about filmmaking. But in general, I don't. And same with making of docs. Like sometimes I like them, sometimes I just whatever. This is a 5-hour, 4-part series called RoboDoc, the creation of Robocop. And somebody had asked us to cover this because of our coming guest, but that is not why I'm raving here. When I finished episode 1, I was like, okay, this is probably my favorite thing of the year so far, because this was everyone involved, all the big players, not side extras saying what a cool movie this was. This is Peter Weller, who's never really done much about this film, Paul Verhoeven, Nancy Allen, Ronnie Cox, Kurtwood Smith. Every angle of this film is explored in depth, and sometimes they say shit like, Peter Weller was a pussy hound or something. You're just like, oh, okay, they're gonna go there. Like, pretty interesting.
That was my biggest takeaway, is this production had its own issues. Like this was not like a beautiful path of, everybody had kismet and everything was great. Like all movies, every movie for the most part has issues. It's just a fact of whether or not they become apparent on screen or not, like whether or not it becomes that tonal mess like we see in Curse, or does it, somehow still gel together. And that's what was amazing, is I've always, I watch something like RoboCop and I view that like that for me is golden age cinema. Like that's when people made movies and it was all artistic integrity and, people weren't interfering, and then you watch it and you're like, oh shit, all types of stuff went wrong here. This was great.
But it's a great example of why vision matters, because they're like, when I'm watching this, the overarching theme is that a lot of people couldn't stand Verhoeven because he's such a handful, such a character, but every single person at every turn calls him a genius. The actors say he's incredible with actors. The special effects, he kept asking more of us. So if you just canned him, you'd have a piece of shit movie. And instead they suffer through it, and you have a masterpiece because you let the vision be the vision. And this is one of those movies that, and when you see the doc, it's hilarious because he's always acting out all the CG. He's always just giving 100%. And the difference is he is this guy coming from a European. Had that been John McTiernan, as good as, Die Hard's coming right after this, what a great director if it would have been one note. RoboCop works because somebody infused it with this wide-eyed the image of America and all its bigness and all its crazy marketing and politics. And it is a unique film. And this doc really gets to the heart of how things come together through very difficult situations to create something that lasts. And I still have one part to go. I'm going to watch it late tonight because it just came out. These are all available on Screambox. And I don't know, it was just really, it filled my heart up, which I always love that feeling when you're watching something that does such a good job.
We were just talking about this last night, you and I, after another podcast. We've done a couple this
year. Oh, yeah, you're on the New Beverly calendar, just so people can listen.
I'm on the New Beverly calendar, but we talked on that about how in the 80s, there was this blind trust of the director's vision.
In the 70s for sure, too. It come from the 70s,
We talked about it in regards to Cronenberg, how even when he went into things like The Fly and Dead Ringers, that it was just kind of like, let him be weird, let him do his thing, it's going to come out in the wash. And that it's just near impossible to kind of get that on, a studio level and even on an independent level anymore, that it's just like, it's so much harder because money is so tight and it's just a completely different market with VODs.
And I don't think it's because money's, they could say that, but I think it's because the trust is just gone, because the people greenlighting the movies are much more fiscally conservative and don't understand art the way that producers used to understand artists and give them trust to try to make some good things. And look, the fact that we are in a year where Oppenheimer is now nearing $1 billion and the lead actor is not famous in this country. Cillian Murphy is not a famous actor in this country. He's a supporting actor in this country. And
oh no, I feel like you're right.
He is. And in England, he's a lead.
Not a leading man.
But no, in this country, and for it to get to that part, and then Barbie's already well past that, you have to look at both of those as examples. In Barbie had IP, but you have to look at them as examples of, okay, that is a sign that that there was something in the 70s, 80s that was a little more pure in this way, and it'd be really cool if the strike ends, and that if they take the right lessons from it, which they won't, instead they'll just remake GI Joe figures, but if they did, they would see that it's the creative voices that if they're left to sing, and if you trust them, amazing stuff can happen. Not always. A lot of, you get, for every Robocop you have about 100 really bad cyborg movies, but anyway, this one is really worth your time, and also really cool to see. I guess in my brain, it's been a long time since I've thought about Ronnie Cox, but Ronnie Cox looks younger than Peter Weller now, and Ronnie Cox has been around in my mind since forever. I mean, Deliverance, for Christ's sake, and he looks pretty good, and he's still kicking. I was like, great, good on you, Ronnie.
I have to tell my quick Peter Weller story. It's very short, but it was just like, oh my God, you're Peter Weller. I was covering Sons of Anarchy for Fangoria, and it was just kind of like a broad overview of the special effects. I got to follow around the special effects team. It was these two amazing women for the day, as they were doing some of the makeup and stuff. And it was the day that they did the Burning the Body in the Pit episode.
I did see it all. I remember Peter Weller being in it. Yeah,
he was directing.
Yeah.
So the day I was on set, he was directing, and I didn't realize that. No one tells you, like television, the directors kind of float in and out. And I remember being on set, and I'm just sitting there like sipping a cup of tea, and all of a sudden I'm like, fuck, Peter Weller just walked by. Like it was, just such an out of nowhere.
Did you hear his voice? Was it like another shot, creep, or something?
He just walked past, and it was just like oh my God, that was so Peter Weller. And then one of the makeup people was like, yeah, he's directing the episode. And I was like, oh my God, I had no idea.
It's Buckaroo Banzai.
It was wild. But before we move into our amazing next segment with Phil Tippett, quickly, I just wanted to go over some of my recent book reads. I've gotten comments like, when are you getting back to graphic novels? I have a stack that I've been working my way through. I've been kind of going back and forth between books and graphic novels, but the past couple of weeks have definitely been more books. Never Whistle at Night. This is a collection of Indigenous horror stories. This one was just released on September 19th, which is today when we're taping this. This one, it's got an intro by Stephen Graham Jones. This one's really cool monsters, like horror stories I've never heard before, which is what I'm always looking for, is something that's going to make me go, that's a new monster. This is Never Whistle at Night. I've never, these stories felt so fresh, so innovative for me. So it was fun. Handyman Method. This is from Simon & Schuster. This one came out on August 8th. I was expecting to really love this one because it's Nick Cutter, who wrote The Deep and The Troop, both of which I love, and then Andrew Sullivan, who has this one I love called The Marigold. It was a domestic horror. It was kind of Amityville-ish, but home improvement. And it was gothic-y. There was some weirdness to it. It did have these trippy moments. So I'm going to give this one kind of like, it wasn't my favorite of the last 2 weeks, but there was some good stuff in it. There were these like weird, trippy how-to videos that they kept watching that I found pretty fun. And again, I love both of the writers. So the writing was awesome. It was just a little, it was family renovating, or not renovating. They had moved into this brand new kind of community, and shit starts going wrong, and you realize that there's something seeping into the house, and it kind of goes deeper into their own kind of domestic connections and things like that. There's a lot of goo in it too, which was fun. And the one that I really dug this week was called Stranger Upstairs by Lisa Maitland. And this one came out on September 12th from Bantam Books, which is an imprint of Random House, I believe. And so, this one was fun. And honestly, reading the back cover of this, it sounded like a book that I would not dig. And I ended up loving it and reading it in like 3 days. Like I binge read this one. It's about an influencer who buys a murder house. She basically buys like the Amityville horror house with the intention of renovating it. Another home renovation book. This is a theme. She is a self-help writer and kind of an online self-help guru, buys this murder house called the Blackwood House, where a guy took a shotgun or a hammer and killed his entire family. She moves in, starts the renovation processes. The entire community hates her because they hate the notoriety that it gives that neighborhood. So they just want to like tear the thing down. They're so pissed off that somebody has purchased it because it means that it's just going to continue. Like no matter how many coats of paint you throw on or how much tile you pull up, it is still the murder house. And she herself is really despicable. Like usually if it's a bad character, like she's doing bad things and she's a bad person, you don't necessarily want to follow. But honestly, in this, it was fun. She is despicable and there is something really fun about that. And then of course, as she's in there starting the renovation process, spooky shit starts happening. Plus she's got all these neighbors that are trying to get her to leave. So it adds this extra layer. I liked where this went. It didn't have the most, convoluted, well-constructed ending. It was just kind of like an ending. But that said, I liked the ride this one took me on. So this is The Stranger Upstairs by Lisa Maitland.
All right.
Okay. And with that, let's hear from a couple more sponsors and then let's bring on Phil Tippett.
Yes, the man who created Ed 209 for Robocop. We won't be talking about that because that's in the documentary, but that's why he's here. Tonight's episode is also brought to you by Deceit 2 the Game. Have you heard the story of the Millhaven Massacre? In 1979, a chilling occult ritual claimed the lives of a once-renowned family at the Millhaven Asylum. The lone survivor was a young boy who vanished while in custody. Since then, the crime remained unsolved, leaving only whispers of the horror behind. No one came close to uncovering what happened that night. That was until the Truth Seekers Anonymous dared to unravel what lies hidden at Millhaven Asylum. Thanks to the Truth Seekers, you and your friends are now pawns in the Game Master's sinister ritual of deceit. Band together, decipher allies from foes, find a way to escape, but you have to work quickly if you want to make it out alive. Deceit 2 is now available on Steam, where trust is fragile and every choice could be your last. Will you emerge victorious or become yet another victim of the ritual of deceit?
Tonight's Colors of the Dark is also brought to you by Final Girl, a new horror board game. Ever wonder what it would be like to be the star in a horror movie? Well, now you can be. In Final Girl, the critically acclaimed single-player horror board game, you are the final girl and it is kill or be killed. Grab a core box and at least one feature film box containing a killer and a location, and you are ready to play. And about an hour later, you'll feel like you just watched an incredible horror movie with all the twists and turns that go with it. Perhaps best of all, no two games will ever be the same. With over 100 possible killer and location combinations, you'll always have a new story waiting for you. Are you the final girl? Final Girl is published by Van Ryder Games and is available at Barnes & Noble, your friendly local game store, or online at vanrydergames.com. Hello and welcome back to Colors of the Dark. Thank you to all of our sponsors that you just heard from. We have wanted to have this person on the show for literally like a decade. It is our honor tonight to welcome Phil Tippett to the show. How are you doing tonight, Phil?
Very well.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being here with us. We just watched the new exciting Robocop documentary, which is absolutely amazing. And it's so cool to see you in there talking about everything.
Creating Ed.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So I'd love to kind of jump back to the very beginning because obviously you've done so much amazing work in your lifetime, but I would love to know kind of what was the first thing that was your spark that like made you say, this is what I want to do for a living?
Well, the ball started to roll when I was about 5 years old, in like around 1955 or so. Was King Kong was on television, and someone had just turned it on. I had no idea what I was looking at, and the screen was really little. And yeah, that's what's began my fascination with dinosaurs for sure. But then the movie that really zapped me was Ray Harryhausen's The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad in 1958. And I was never the same since.
What do you think?
So,
sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just curious about what do you think I mean, I don't know if you've even given it thought over all these years, but what do you think the quality that mesmerizes us about stop motion, especially at an early age? Because funnily enough, I was 4 years old, 5 years old, seeing Star Wars, and it was actually the chessboard that had a similar effect to me because I knew it didn't look like the other stuff. And it looked like there's a little bit of magic happening on the screen, with the characters moving and the way they move. And it's just not the same as, obviously regular motion. What have you ever gone deep into trying to figure out what it is, the draw to seeing it that way?
Ray expressed it as like a surreal kind of a thing. It was at its inception was a cross between a new technology, motion pictures, and artists and filmmakers being able to realize immediately that there's a lot of things that you could do with puppets in animation, and then you could have complete control. You didn't have to wait for actors, or deal with their antics, or you were just in your own garret making this stuff, and it has an otherworldly it looks like it's conjured out of something, by an alchemist. And I didn't understand what it was when I first saw it. And, my dad said, well, it's something like cartoon animation, only with models, which, okay. But it wasn't until much later that I discovered Famous Monsters. That was a magazine that was edited by Foy Ackerman. And Foy was a friend of Ray's, and so he would publish articles on him with pictures and whatnot. And so that's where I really began to like, oh, okay.
Yeah, how do you learn this? Yeah.
Yeah, that was my next question, actually, is how did you start learning it? Was it just messing around on your own, learning how to do it, or was there somebody who you were kind of fostered under?
It's on my own.
Wow.
I mowed lawns, and I got an 8mm single frame camera, and then we didn't have the technology that was available today, where your learning curve was relatively quickly. But it took me 3 months to get through 8mm roll. And then I had to send it back to Rochester, New York to get processed. And then 2 weeks later, it would come back.
Wow.
And it was kind of like attempting to learn how to play a piano and not hearing it for 2 weeks, and then going back and trying to, what the fuck,
So what was the first motion picture that you were on where it wasn't just you and kind of making it on your own, that you were actually creating something where it was like, holy shit, like I'm on a movie right now?
There were a couple of things. I don't know which came first. One was John Davison and Joe Dante's Piranha.
Wow.
And, they didn't know how many pictures they were really going to make, but they're big fans of stop motion. And so, I was able to do a handful of shots there. And then around the time of Star Wars, I was working on stuff for Star Wars, and the Crater Lake Monster was a stop motion character, which is kind of like an amphibious dinosaur. So I made that, and I was working for Dave Allen, who had the entire job, and would do a few shots for him. So, and then of course, the Star Wars and the chess set, the cantina, and all that.
Yeah.
Do you get a sense of something special? Again, when you're working on any movie, you're at the starting point of something. It's not it hasn't been sequelized. It isn't a blockbuster yet, but especially something at the early stages, something like Star Wars. Did you get a sense that creatively there was some special thing happening there with so many artists and so many different types of art being used for it?
Well, we came in at the very, very end, and did the cantina. George screened the cantina, seeing the material that he had, and he wasn't happy with it. So, he hired, Rick Baker, and Rick was working on another project. that he's sorry that he worked on instead of Star Wars, but he got a lot more money. It was The Incredible Melting Man.
Oh yeah, say that one. Yeah.
Yep.
And so he hired, 4-stop motion animators that were his friends, and so George said, "Can you make as many aliens as you can in 6 weeks?" And so we did, and then we went on to the insert stage on La Brea, and Carol Ballard was the DP, and we got into the costumes and we acted ish. And while we were constructing the cantina stuff, George would come by every week and check our progress, and he saw that I had a stop motion puppet that I had made, years earlier when I was like, whatever, 17, 18. And at that time, Michael Crichton had just come out with Future World.
Oh yeah, the sequel.
And in that, there's a hologram scene with knights in armor on horses on a chessboard. And what George was originally going to do was you just take the masks and have that be, those characters that would be composited in the shot. And then he saw my puppet and he went like, ba-bang. Can I have this, in my movie? And yeah, sure. And then he said, could you make me 10 aliens, stop motion aliens, in a couple of weeks? And John Berg and I did, and went to ILM, and Dennis Murin set up the shot. And we spent a couple of nights right at the end of the schedule. The crew, we had these black flats that we were in. The crew was having their wrap party, and they were all hooting and hollering, getting drunk, right next to us.
And you guys are still working like crazy to get it done.
You don't work like crazy doing that stuff.
Yeah.
Like watching grass grow.
Oh my God. So for that, that single chess scene in Star Wars, how long did it take to do something like that?
2 nights.
That's 2 nights. Oh, that's so meticulous.
Yeah. Wow. 2 weeks of building and 2 nights to shoot.
Oh my goodness. So you obviously had some major stuff during the 1980s, but I'm intrigued when you started doing some more bringing in the computer technology, when you got into the Jurassic Park years. How had you ever learned to kind of do this stuff on computer, or were you guys kind of creating the programs and kind of creating it as you go? Because that seems so cutting edge at the time period.
Hell no. I am a technological imbecile. I'm 150% analog guy. And so I really had no interest in learning how to work on a computer. But at that time, my skills were needed in a different direction because I knew a shitload about dinosaurs, and I knew the production process. And so it was like a no-brainer for that.
Yeah. How did that dinosaur knowledge come about? You've obviously done a lot of dinosaur movies. Has this was it a side passion of just researching dinosaurs, or did this all kind of come out of various projects?
Well, it sprung from King Kong, when I was 5 years old. And, that set me on a course. I was just fascinated. And, as I grew older, I just, tried to learn everything I could. And I had my parents drop me, in going to school, in San Diego, there was nobody that was interested in what I was interested in. So I just spent my time by myself, learning how to animate. And then, my parents would drop me off at the library for the weekends, and I just spend the weekends, with index cards, going through all their books and writing things down and learning about all the, geological epochs and epochs or whatever. And yeah, so.
That's amazing.
Did you do the same kind of thing for your bug research for Starship Troopers? Because I think that was when we first noticed it on a big scale, just seeing so many effects at once and still being believable, which is not what we often think when we see massive attacks in movies nowadays. So much CG just takes over now.
Well, they're two different animals. I mean, the dinosaurs were evolved over, 100 million years, and so the skeletons just tell you what to do. I mean, you need to estimate their, water weight and but it's basically just a turnkey thing. You just wind it up and, the bones tell you what to do. The arachnids were just fanciful things, so you just have to figure out what looks good.
They moved so well, though. Like, I'm intrigued. Like, were you researching bug movement? Because it's always in the movement that I lose something.
We would at dailies, run like documentaries of bugs and insects, but it was a pain in the ass for me, and so was Jurassic Park, because the animators just didn't have the skill level that you needed. And so what I did was I had some stop motion models, some rubber models that were articulated, that were based off the Stan Winston designs. He did these maquettes before they built the big things, and I gave them to the animators, and or I took them and I posed them. It should be like this. It should be like that. It's just like that. And then they would block out a scene or shot, and it was like, oh my God. And so I put up a animation peg bar, on the Avid, and put a animation cell on that, and then I would meticulously draw out this blocking that was completely fucked up, and would just go like this nose, the front part of the dinosaur would move this far, and I'd put like, with a Sharpie on that, and then it would go like this, and get a smaller pin, and it was like, it starts like that, and then that, like that, and those 3 frames are the same, and then this one gets bigger, and this one gets bigger, and this one gets bigger, and then that one gets smaller, and that one gets smaller, and that's it. It was like for every fucking thing, and I just hate micromanaging, but what else was I to do?
Yeah. Oh, that seems so meticulous.
Oh, it's horrible.
Yeah.
What sets Paul Verhoeven apart? Because you've worked a number of times, and obviously, watching the behind the scenes, I've always thought just satirically and just his dark sense of humor always shine through. But having worked, especially with Starship, where you guys had to work really closely because of such a complex, what sets him apart from other directors you've worked with?
He's an artist, as defined against commercial artists, and George and Stephen are, very aware of their audiences, and are aiming for them. And, when Paul's been asked before who he makes his movies for, he says, I make them for me, like an artist. And certainly he, hopes that, they make money. But if they don't, he made the movie he wanted to make,
That kind of segues in a sense to, you are creating art all these years for films. You're in service of the design of something else for a director or for somebody's vision that you're adding to. And then at what point when did you first start working on Mad God, something that it seems more in that line where it feels like something that was made for you, essentially?
It's you can see that it is somebody's brain baby, that this is a purely organic concept that came out of somebody's cerebellum. So yeah.
Yeah, well, I had been working for years on trying to develop a puppet film, and they just were too I don't know, cute. That's not the right word, because they were dark. but my brain, just started to percolate in the like mid 80s and turned in a different direction based on, the material I was reading, like Freud and Jung and, art history and more geology and whatnot, anything I could get my hands on to feed my brain. And this thing just appeared as a vision, I mean, literally. And the whole thing was, get into it a bit, but like a spiritual journey, are you aware of Carl Jung's The Red Book?
I don't know that
I've
one.
read a lot of Carl Jung, but I haven't read the Red Book.
It's this huge volume. And it's a very beautiful book. But we went down the same path. And you give yourself to the vision, and that changes you. I mean, literally changes you, because it's the hero's journey, really, in terms of, you go down a path that leads to a path that leads to a gate, and then there's a talking crow that tells you to go left, and a talking wolf that you follow through a tunnel, and blah 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 blah. As you go through this adventure, and you pretty much hit the same beats as Campbell, in the hero's journey. And
now that you said that, it makes like the inner circle and the inner sanctum. It's all okay. Now I have to go back and rewatch it, keeping that in mind, that it follows that beat by beat.
The movie doesn't,
yeah,
but my journey did.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah, and similar thing happened to me that happened to Jung, which he spent 16 years in secret writing this thing. And like me, it changed him to the extent that it kind of drove him cuckoo. And I like to imagine that, his family realized what was going on. And I like to imagine that they sent him to a psychiatrist. That would be a good movie. So
a Freudian psychologist, of course.
Freudian, definitely.
Yeah.
So I, after Robocop, I had a crew, and I had written about a 12-page outline that was more like kind of a poem, and it was written on a typewriter, and again, this thing was almost like I had been touched by something, some other force, because I saw it right there. And so after Robocop 2, I shot about 6 minutes and realized that the scope of the thing was too big, and lost the crew. And so for the next 20 years, I have no idea why, but in general, I'm very objective oriented and get on things like Ileana Ape. And I just kept developing tons of storyboards and designs, and, studying more, Freud and Jung and whatnot. And miraculously, about 12 years ago, I was able to accumulate, a bunch of volunteers to work on it that wanted to reboot it. And because they had no idea I was archiving it, and they thought it was some old lost Czechoslovakian movie from the 40s. And they were the guys that grew up watching the Star Wars and Robocop documentaries, and they wanted to work with, stop motion models and sets and lights. And then they didn't, that bus had left the station, and they were, computer graphics artists that were working for me. And they wanted to do a shot. And I still had some of the puppets. I had the assassin puppets. And they did the shot where he's going down the stairs with his light. it was just one thing led to the next, and it kind of snowballed. And I'd give talks around town, and got high school and college volunteers or volunteers from everywhere. And then on the during the week, I would come up with processes. You do this, this, this. So they did a lot of the heavy lifting, over a long period of time. And so they were people that were interested in this stuff. So I was able to mentor them and show them what to do. But in some cases, it was like giving razor blades to 4-year-olds. It was just like, don't go near the bandsaw. Okay? And even if there was a problem with X-Acto knives, it's just, and so 12 years later, I really started to disintegrate. And you hear these stories of like Beethoven and these other artists that end up looking like homeless people, really. I just didn't care myself. I was like in a different universe. And, my clothes were all, I wouldn't take showers. My beard and hair were really long. My clothes were all, ripped. I had, scabs all over my hands and arms, from, making up sets. And I'm bipolar and unipolar, so I don't get depressed unless, my dog gets run over. But it's my superpower. And I just don't stop once I get going. And I can work like easily 10 or 12 hours a day. And then I'm exhausted and just drop in front of the TV. But I, couldn't take my mind off. So I self-medicated with alcohol. And I just turned into this thing. And while I was, working on it, I discovered myself through what I was doing. It was like, hey, this is, I don't know about my behavior. And so I looked up bipolar and consulted a psychiatrist, and then she gave me medication, and then things were a lot better. But it took me months to recover from doing Mad God. It really zapped my brain. And, like I said, I had a vision. It really was, a spiritual journey, to the extent that I just saw the whole of this thing. And when I was, it was rebooting, I took a lot of storyboards that I had drawn, and the 6 minutes that I had, and just, put together, edited like about 10 minutes of what the thing could be. And that was just to show the crew, this is kind of what it's like. And then I forgot about it. And when, I started doing interviews and for, some documentaries, we pulled out this thing, and everything was there in that 10 minutes. It was the movie. So I knew exactly where it was going. I was like guided by the North Star or something.
How did that?
So even
I was just gonna. How did that feel then? Because it's so personal, it's so internal, for so long in your head. When you finally put that up on a screen with your first audience to watch it with them, what was that experience compared to all the other experiences you'd had on other films?
Oh, night and day. The other films, it was like a day job, you know. But I was really lucky through my friend Alex Cox.
Who's in the film?
He's in the film. I met the composer Dan Wool and Richard Beggs, who's a very famous sound designer that I'm amazed, wanted to work on the film. And I'd go once, Richard had something to hear, I would look at the thing. It was a totally different movie. I just was totally amazed. And when I worked with Dan, most of Dan's work that he had done for Alex was very Marconi-esque. And Alex was doing a lot of Western stuff. So I didn't know what his range was. And so I showed him the first 6 minutes of Mad God. And then I would do like, from time to time, like high 8 videos that were like collages. There would just be anything that would be interesting, like the compost heap that's crawling with worms, and speed that up. Or when my kids, I'm working on something and my kids come in, and they're not on screen, they would, like ask me a question. And the soundtrack was AM radio, which I had to go looking for. And I would just take the dial and wind it back and forth, and that was the soundtrack. And Dan and I were on totally the same wavelength, because what I didn't know was that his thing was ambient music. And so the idea of working in an artistic realm, we were pretty much had the Vulcan mind meld thing going. And what I did not want to do was have like a temp track like you do in a normal movie when it's being made. And, that's the result of a production process and time and whatnot. And so you cut to that. And then the composer comes in. And I thought that was like, I understood the necessity for doing it that way, but I didn't want to work that way. And so with the 6 minutes and the few storyboards I had, I asked Dan to, see what he could come up with. Because what I wanted to do was have the score evolve with the movie. And so they would inform each other. And so as we were building the thing, he had like 6 minutes worth of material, and Ken Rogerson, the editor, and me Ken would just take that 6 minutes and flop it and have it go backwards and cut it up and speed it up and slow it down. And then, slowly as we, actually built the thing, going back and forth, I really wanted Dan's tone and feeling to be integrated into the picture. And that's how we worked.
Could you, having survived it, could you do it again? Could you make another film in that way?
Yeah, actually, that was my next question. Is I've heard that there might be some type of quasi follow-up that you're working on.
Yeah, but I could never do anything like that again. But I am working on a quasi sequel to Mad God.
Can you give us any details about it?
The backbone of the story that I took, it took me 2 or 3 years of like knocking my head against the wall to try and get my head around this. And somehow I ran across a book that I had that was very informative for me for Mad God, which was Dante's Inferno. And so it's essentially that. It's like going through the 9 rings of hell. And but when Dante wrote his, he kind of rubbed the wrong people, people the wrong way, and had to get the hell out of Dodge. And so I'm doing the same thing. I'm using everybody I hate. And certainly Donald Trump figures very well into this. And so it's hell, purgatory, and the Garden of Eden and heaven.
That is cool.
I want to know that purely from like a creative standpoint, 15 years from when you kind of first had that vision to when you were, you know, kind of seeing it on screen, did anything in that vision change? Or
it was 30 years.
30. Oh, yes. So over that time, like, did any elements change, or did it, you know, what came out look exactly like you had first seen it?
No, as I built it, I designed it in such a way that I had gates integrated into it so that I could open it up at any point and go into another, you know, take another path. And so when I got it up to like 40 minutes, it was like, you know, let's go for it. You know, let's turn it into a feature. And, you know, I could, you know, pretty seamlessly, you know, and, you know, while I was doing it, you know, it's like 12 years, you know, so it gives me plenty of time to, you know, I live by Post-its, you know, I'm like totally analog, and ideas just come to me out of nowhere. And so, you know, I just continue to develop it that way.
From the like the early inspiration you talked about with King Kong, and you know, it's always obvious those early influences, but like since you've been working professionally, are there other artists, you know, your Spunkmeyers or Brothers Quay or other people out there whose work has continued to fuel, you know, your inspiration for what you do? Or other?
Well, the major figure was Carl Zeman, you know, and the way he approached the filmmaking, which was kind of very ballsy and very artistic, and just magical, you know.
100%. So as you were kind of looking to keep going with Mad God, like, will it be the same characters, or are you kind of starting fresh with it?
Yeah, there'll be the two lead characters are the alchemist, yeah, and the nurse.
Nice. How?
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just curious because I've never seen this done like actually on person. I've seen a couple of live animation shows or stop animation shows, but like when you're actually constructing them, like how big is the alchemist, or the assassin? Like how big are these actual?
Well, the assassin is 1/6 scale, you know, like the size of G.I. Joe. And that was intentional in that I could buy costumes. I didn't have to make the costumes. So, yeah.
Where on earth did you find those costumes? Like that
I just went to like Ken and Barbie. Yeah.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
The alchemist was a guy in a suit that was shot high speed.
I know we talked about it off air, but I really loved the episode you were involved with in Poker Face this year. It just, it ticked a lot of my favorite things in movies: creature designers and murder mystery, and Nick Nolte was perfectly cast. How'd that come about, and how much input did you get to do creatively in the actual storyline? Because it felt like it had a lot of inside knowledge.
Well, it was, you know, Ryan and I have been friends for quite some time. You know, he was here doing, you know, one of the Star Wars shows, and he was like a big fan of stop motion. And so he just wanted to have, there were these mythological characters, you know, the Cyclops and the Cerberus. And so he said, do whatever you want to do. And so we did. And, you know, he said, I you know, he never frame fucked the thing. He just said, give me it and I'll use it and cut it in.
Did Nolte have to study you and follow to get into the mind of
you know, what happened was they sent him some documentaries on me. And what had happened was somebody, his agent or his wife, you know, he was just like a wild man. He looked like I did at the end of Mad God. Cleaned him up a bit, and he goes like, why did I shave my beard off and cut my hair? And when he went on the set, it was like, meh.
Well, it's great for people who haven't seen it. They should really need to check it out.
I went on the set for a few days, and oh God, my brain. Who's the actress?
Natasha.
Natasha.
Yeah.
Right. And we really hit it off. I went to get lunch, and the crew was younger, and I didn't want to have to answer any questions about Star Wars. And so I just went back to the set with my lunch, and Natasha was there, and we got into this great philosophical conversation, for about an hour, and our paths were very similar, and that was really meaningful.
I'm excited it got renewed for a second season. I need the strike to end so it can get to work. But we all need that strike to end. So hopefully.
Oh, it's going to transform the whole racket,
Yeah. So before we let you go for the evening, what have you been watching or reading recently that has really been inspiring for you, knowing that you're a reader, you dig philosophy? Like, what have you been watching or reading lately?
A Chinese author, Dorothy Tse, and my brain. I'm gonna have to go get it.
Oh, I'm just Googling Dorothy Z, and this is awesome.
I mean, if somebody makes the Rancor, they're allowed to go and find a book.
Yeah, they can go find a book. It's totally allowed.
The Rancor messed me up enough as a kid that I think this is fun.
I'm just into whatever was behind him now, whatever we're looking at. This is brilliant.
Yeah, something that looks like some sort of devices.
Yeah, it looks like crazy devices back there. And now I'm looking up Dorsey C, and this is really cool.
Oh, Leonora Carrington, who is a very terrific artist. And really interesting story, who orbited was part of the surrealist movement, and so Dorothy at Sea and Carrington is what I've been reading.
Great answers, because I have not heard of either of those, and now they're going on my list. So thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for talking with us and sharing your amazing story. And as soon as you get any type of follow-up to Mad God, we're going to have you back on, because I need to hear more about it.
Well, it may be when you're like 80 years old. I mean, that was the thing about Mad God. I could not have made the film until I was 60 years old. I just was not mature enough. I didn't. My wife was in the editorial department in Amadeus, so we'd go out to dinner and drinks with Milos Forman. And as a young filmmaker, I would ask, him if he had any advice, and he gave me the best advice ever, which was, if you want to take a good shit, you have to eat well. And it was like, the more time you have to develop something, the better it's going to be. And I certainly took my time.
I think that's beautiful, because so much of Hollywood is about, it's a young person's game, or you're going to age out and things like that. And the idea that you have to be older and more mature to firmly grasp, a particular art form, it's beautiful. It's reaffirming.
Yeah, well, that's why, very many directors are, you just keep working, until they're at a ripe age.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. This has been absolutely awesome. And everybody, please check out the RoboCop 2 documentary on Screambox. Elric and I have been totally digging it. It's just great. We will be back in 2 weeks, where we will kind of be digging into our spooky season from there. Thank you so much to our sponsors, and please check us out on our Patreon show, Deep Cut. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, bye.
Thanks so much, Phil.
Thanks, Phil.
My pleasure.
The Colors of the Dark podcast is a Fangoria production. Producers and co-hosts are Rebekah, McKendry, and Elric Kane. Executive producers are Tara Ainsley and Abby Gould. Associate producer is Jessica Safa-Vamir. Sonic branding by Michael Rodriguez. And, of course, our amazing sound engineer, Ernie Hurtado.